Imagine you're riding on a very luxurious Royal Mail train in Great Britain, and suddenly the train stops somewhere in the pitch black night, and a gang of 15 masked men, all dressed in black, descends upon it. This isn't a scene from a Hollywood action movie. This is a true story that actually happened. The story of the biggest train robbery in all of British history. And in this video, I'm going to reveal to you all the details of this legendary heist that happened in 1963 exactly. And I'll also tell you about the small mistake they made at the end, which led the police to discover every member of the gang, one after another. Everything started with a man named Bruce Reynolds. He was a very skilled professional thief. He was the mastermind behind this entire massive and extremely dangerous operation. He wanted to do something that would be talked about in all of British history forever. Bruce came from a poor family and grew up in the working class neighborhoods of London. Since he was young, he dreamed of wealth, glory, and fame by any means possible. He started his criminal life with small thefts, and then he began to grow and evolve. He teamed up with the most dangerous and skilled criminals in London at the time, like Gordon Goody, who was his main partner in planning the operation. Gordon was a stylish and cultured man, and no one ever suspected him either. And Buster Edwards, the former boxer and owner of a very famous nightclub. Buster was strong and intimidating, but he was also kind and loving to his family. And Charlie Wilson, who was known for his extreme violence and ferocity. Charlie was the most dangerous one in the gang and was never afraid of anything. They were a successful gang, but they had no experience in robbing trains at all. That's why they enlisted the help of another gang called the South Coast Raiders. Among them was Roger Cordray, an expert at manipulating all the train signals. Roger was a genius with electronics and also knew everything about trains. And Roy James, who was a professional race car driver, and his job was the quick getaway. Roy was the fastest driver in London, and no one could ever catch him. And also Ronnie Biggs, who would eventually become the most famous of them all. Ronnie was a skilled carpenter, and his job was to modify the trucks for the robbery, but they were missing one very important thing. Something essential for the whole operation. They needed precise information from inside the Royal Mail system itself. And this is where a mysterious person named the Ulsterman comes in, meaning the Irishman. A senior official in the British Royal Mail, he provided vital secrets about the trains, like the train schedules and the exact amounts being transported every night. He told them that the train would soon be carrying a huge sum of money because there was a public holiday at all British banks at that time. The amount was more than £2.5 million sterling, which is worth more than £60 million in today's value, approximately. The plan was to stop the train in a very isolated and dark place, steal the money, escape to a nearby farm they had bought some time ago, and stay hidden there until things completely calmed down and people forgot about them. But the strange part of the story hasn't even started yet. Everyone,
we're still at the beginning, and you'll see the incredible things that happened later. 2 months before the operation, they bought an old farm called Leathers Lane. It was far from people and perfect for hiding out after the robbery. The farm was dilapidated and old, but it was perfect for their plan. They prepared a large truck and 2 Land Rovers for a quick getaway from there. And they put fake license plates on the cars to mislead the police. And they brought along a retired train driver to help them move the Royal Mail train, because none of them knew how to drive the Royal Mail train at all. They studied the train's route and schedule with extreme precision, and they figured out the best place to stop it and rob it without anyone seeing them. They chose a place called Sears Crossing. It was an isolated and dark place, and there was absolutely no one around at night. Roger Cordray was the expert in manipulating all the train signals, and he was the one who planned how to stop the train without causing any accident at all. The plan was simple but very clever. They were going to cover the green light and turn on a fake red light powered only by a battery. And the driver would stop the train because he would think there was a problem on the track ahead. And that's when they would attack him, steal the money, and escape very quickly. Everything was prepared, and all that was left was to execute the plan at exactly the right time. The train was called the Royal Mail Train, and it was carrying the bank's money. It had 12 carriages and 72 postal workers sorting the mail. The second carriage was called the High Value Package Carriage, and that's where all the money they wanted to steal was kept exactly. There were 5 postal workers inside, but they weren't armed at all. The gang met up the day before the operation and reviewed the plan one last time. Everyone knew their exact role and there was absolutely no room for error. On August 8, 1963, exactly at 3 a.m., the train suddenly stopped in the middle of the route. It stopped at a red signal at Sears Crossing in the British countryside. Of course, the signal wasn't actually red. This was a clever trick. The gang covered the green light with a black glove and turned on a fake red light next to it. The driver's assistant, David Whitby, got off to make a call and find out exactly what was going on. But when he got off, he found that all the telephone lines had been completely cut and destroyed. At that moment, they attacked him from all sides, tied him up quickly with ropes, and stormed the driver's cabin like ghosts in the pitch-black darkness. The driver, Jack Mills, tried to resist with all his strength, but he couldn't do anything at all. They struck him on the head with an iron rod, causing him to lose consciousness immediately and collapse to the ground. They needed to move the train to another location that would be easier for stealing and unloading. That's why they brought along a retired train driver to move the train to the spot. But the big surprise was that the driver didn't know how to operate the modern train because he was only used to the old trains. A huge commotion broke out, and they were afraid the entire plan would fall apart in an instant. So they were forced to wake up the driver, Jack Miles, who had been knocked out by the blow, and threatened him with a weapon to move the train to the required location immediately. And indeed, he moved the train, trembling from fear and pain.
They brought Diego a land bridge, and that's when the big unloading operation began. They formed a human chain and moved the money at an insanely fast pace. They transported 120 bags full of money out of a total of 128 bags. Each bag contained thousands of British pounds, and in less than half an hour, they had completely vanished from sight. They escaped with the truck, carrying the millions they had stolen from the royal train, and headed to Leatherslade Farm, which they had bought exactly 2 months earlier. They thought their plan had succeeded 100% and that everything was over. But they didn't know that the biggest mistake of their entire lives would be made at this very farm. Wait and listen to what happened next. The gang arrived at the farm with the huge treasure they had stolen, and they sat down to split the loot, play, sing, and celebrate a lot. They were happy and thought they were the smartest people in the whole world. They divided the money equally among themselves, and each one took his share of the loot, and from all the excitement and bravado, they started playing Monopoly, but they didn't play with the game money. They played with real money too. Imagine playing Monopoly with real stolen money from the train. But they forgot the most important rule in the world of crime and criminals. Never leave behind any traces that could reveal your identity. But the gang left their fingerprints everywhere in the entire farm, on the Monopoly board, on the water bottles, on the plates and spoons, on the chairs and tables, and even on the walls of the farm. And after a few days, they decided to flee the farm at lightning speed because they felt the police could arrive in the area at any moment. They were supposed to clean up the farm and burn all the evidence before leaving. But they didn't do that. They left everything behind and escaped in a hurry. And indeed, the police arrived at the farm just 2 days after they fled. They found all the evidence that incriminated the entire gang right there. And the most important piece of evidence was the Monopoly board, which had everyone's fingerprints on it. At this point, the police started to identify the gang members one by one after another. They began to fall into the hands of the police very easily. The first one to get caught was named Roger Cordy, and it happened in a really stupid way because he paid his rent in advance with cash from the robbery. The landlady was the widow of a former police officer, and she immediately reported him to the police. And that's how the arrests began. The police formed a special unit led by the very famous detective Tommy Butler, who was known for his sharp intelligence and remarkable determination for justice. Tommy Butler was a legendary detective and wouldn't rest until he caught them, and he started chasing the gang like their own shadow, and he didn't let any of them escape easily. One after another, they were caught and their identities were revealed to the entire police force. Gordon Goody was caught, and so were Charlie Wilson and Buster Edwards. And Ronnie Biggs, Roy James, Jimmy White, and Tommy Wisby were also caught. And Jim Hussey, Bob Welch, and all the rest were caught one after another. But there were 3 members of the gang who were never caught, and to this day, no one knows who they are.
And their identities remained a secret that no one knew except them. After most members of the gang were caught, a historic trial took place. The entire trial was held in the city of Aylesbury, and it lasted a full 51 days. There were 613 pieces of evidence and 140 witnesses in court as well. Judge Andrew Davis described the robbery as a heinous and very violent crime and sentenced 7 members of the gang to 30 years in prison each. It was a very harsh sentence at the time and no one expected it at all. Even murderers didn't receive sentences that long back then. The sentences shocked people and even shocked the criminals themselves. The British press covered the trial and it became the talk of the people. But the story didn't end here. On the contrary, a new and even stranger story began. The story of the prison break that itself became a legend in history. The first to escape was Charlie Wilson in 1964. He escaped from prison in less than 3 minutes. But imagine, a group came, broke into the prison, got him out, and they all escaped in the blink of an eye at night. He traveled to Paris and got plastic surgery, and then he went to Mexico as well. He lived in Mexico for years, and then moved to Canada and lived there too. And a year later, the most famous member of the gang escaped. The legendary Ronnie Biggs. He escaped from prison in a very cinematic way. They parked a truck next to the prison wall and he and his friend escaped quickly. Biggs traveled to Paris and got plastic surgery to completely change his appearance. Then he escaped to Australia and after that to Brazil, where he lived for many years, and they were never able to bring him back to Britain because there was no extradition agreement between the two countries at all. Also because he had a Brazilian son, and that gave him legal immunity. He became a celebrity in Brazil and even recorded songs with some very famous rock bands. As for the mastermind, Bruce Reynolds, he escaped to Mexico after the robbery and lived a life of luxury and extravagance with his family for a very long time. But eventually he ran out of money and secretly returned to Britain to look for work, where he was caught in 1968 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Buster Edwards also fled to Mexico, but he couldn't adapt there. He returned and turned himself into the police voluntarily and was sentenced to 15 years. After he got out of prison, he opened a flower stall next to a train station in London. As for the poor driver, Jack Mills, he never recovered from the trauma. He died 7 years after the robbery, still psychologically affected. The blow he received to his head affected him for the rest of his life. His assistant, David Whitby, also never recovered and died of a heart attack. Ronnie Biggs lived in Brazil until he was 71 years old. Then he decided to return to Britain voluntarily because he missed his homeland so much. He said, "I want to go into a British pub and have a pint of beer like I used to." He returned in 2001 and was imprisoned. But then they released him for health reasons and he died in 2013 at the age of 84. Charlie Wilson was also killed in Spain in 1990. He was murdered by a hitman on a motorcycle in front of his house and they never found out who it was. Buster Edwards had a sad ending because he committed suicide in the 90s. Gordon Goody lived in Spain, opened a bar on the beach, and died at an old age. And Bruce Reynolds got out of prison and started writing books about his whole life, and he died in 2013 at the age of 81 as well. This is the story of the most famous gang in all of Britain's history. A gang that stole millions but never got to enjoy it at all. Some of them died in prison, and some died on the run, alone and far from their homeland, and some of them turned themselves in because they missed their country so much. Crime never ends well, no matter how well planned it is. And this story became a legend in the history of British crime, and they made many movies, books, and series about it. So how did they manage to steal all that huge amount of money from the train? The secret was in the precise information from inside the Royal Mail system itself, along with good planning and bold execution of the dangerous operation. But how did they get caught? The secret was in a tiny, trivial detail that no one thought about. Fingerprints on an old Monopoly board were the small mistake that destroyed the biggest gang in all of Britain and brought the legend of the Great Train Robbery to a dramatic end. Most of the money was never recovered, and to this day, no one knows where it is. Some people say it's buried in a secret place that no one knows about. And 3 members of the gang were never caught and lived their lives with the money. But the stories of criminals and legends never end with us, folks. If you like this story, click on the video that appeared on the screen and watch it too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get all the new stories. And if you have any story you want us to tell, write it for me in the comments. Love you all so much, and I'll see you in the next video, my dearest followers.